Bonjour. In this grammar presentation, we're going to talk about the indefinite article, and you should be able to recognize indefinite articles in French. In English, the indefinite article is an. For instance, a student, an apple. In French, the indefinite article has different forms depending on the gender and number of the noun that follows. For instance, étudiant is a singular masculine noun. The form you're going to use is un étudiant. Repeat, un étudiant, which can be translated as a male student. Étudiante is a singular feminine noun. The form we're going to use with singular feminine nouns is une étudiante. Repeat, une étudiante, which can be translated as a female student. Étudiant, étudiante is a singular non-binary noun. The form you're going to use is un, une étudiant, étudiante, which can be translated as a non-binary student or simply as a student. Étudiant is a plural masculine noun. Because it is plural, you're going to use the form des. Des étudiants. Repeat, des étudiants. Which can be translated as students or some students. Étudiante is a plural feminine noun. Because it's a plural noun, you're also going to use the form des. Des étudiantes. Repeat, des étudiantes, which can be translated as some students, or more specifically, some female students, or simply as students or female students. Livre is a singular masculine noun, so you're also going to use the form un livre. Repeat, un livre, which can be translated as a book. Fenêtre is a singular feminine noun. You're going to use the form une. Une fenêtre. Repeat, une fenêtre, which can be translated as a window. Cahier is a plural masculine noun. Because it's a plural noun, you're going to use the form des. Repeat, des cahiers, which can be translated as notebooks or some notebooks. Affiche des affiches. Repeat, des affiches, which can be translated as posters or some posters. Note that the plural indefinite article is omitted in English or translated with some. Il y a des étudiants may mean there are students or there are some students. Note that after negation, you use the negative indefinite article de or the apostrophe before a vowel sound. Consider il y a un étudiant. Il y a un étudiant means there is a student. The negation of il y a un étudiant will be il n'y a pas d'étudiant. Repeat, il n'y a pas d'étudiant. Which means there is no student, or there isn't any student, or there isn't a student. Il y a des livres, means there are books. Livre is in the plural, so you're going to use the definite article des. The negative sentence of il y a des livres is going to be il n'y a pas de livres. Repeat, il n'y a pas de livres. Il n'y a pas de livres means There are no books. There aren't any books. There aren't books. Be aware of the difference between the use of affirmative and negative indefinite articles after negation. Il n'y a pas de professeur. There is no professor. There isn't a professor. There isn't any professor. Il n'y a pas un professeur here means there isn't one professor or there isn't a single one professor. So careful, if you use the definite article un in a negative context, it will be interpreted as a single one professor, which can be confusing. Il n'y a pas de livre, mais il y a un cahier. Here we have the negative form de after negation, il n'y a pas. And it can be translated as there are no books, but there is a notebook. Now, consider the following example. Ceci n'est pas un livre, c'est un cahier. With ce n'est pas, you can use un because it's a matter of identity. This is something I'm going to talk more about later in the course. So, ce n'est pas un livre, c'est un cahier can be translated as this isn't a book, this is a notebook. So just be aware of these different structures. Remember that you're not only expected to recognize them at this point of your learning. Here is a summary of the different forms. So in an affirmative context, that is when it's not negative, for the singular masculine form, you're going to use un. Repeat, un. With singular feminine noun, you're going to use the form une. Repeat, une. With plural nouns, you're going to use des. Repeat, des. And finally, in the negative context, you're going to use the form de, repeat de, or the form d apostrophe, de, in front of a vowel sound. Application. Can now pause the video and translate the following sentences. Il y a un professeur means there is a male professor. You recognize un, which is the article for masculine singular. Il y a une professeure means there is a female professor or female teacher for that matter. You recognize the form une, which is feminine singular form of the indefinite article. Il y a des étudiants means there are students. It also means there are some students. It depends. You recognize here the plural form des. Remember, des is mandatory in French, while optional in English. You often have nothing or some in some contexts. Then, il n'y a pas d'étudiants can mean there are no male students or there aren't any students. Here you recognize the negative de, which becomes d apostrophe in front of a vowel. 5, il n'y a pas un étudiant. Here you're going to translate it as there isn't a single one male student. Remember that if you use the form un or une or des, the affirmative form, or actually un or une after negation, is going to be translated as a single one. Here are some more practice sentences, so you can pause the video and translate them. Il y a une étudiant, étudiante, can be translated as there is a non-binary student. Il y a des professeurs, can be translated as there are professors, or there is no professor, there isn't a professor, or there isn't any professor. Il y a une étudiante can be translated as there is a female student. Une is the form used for singular feminine noun. And finally, il n'y a pas une étudiante. Here we have the negative context, il n'y a pas, followed by une. So it's going to be translated as there isn't a single one female student or there isn't one female student. If you have any questions about the content of this presentation, please feel free to write them in the comment section and I'll be happy to answer them. Au revoir!